Bushman's Hole Rescue Tragedy. In 2005, a diver by the name of David Shaw set out on a mission in an attempt to recover the body of Dion Dreyer from a South African sinkhole called Bushman's Hole. Dreyer, a diver who had perished there a decade earlier at a depth of 50 meters due to oxygen toxicity, body was still resting at the bottom of the sinkhole, approximately a depth of 270 meters. The recovery's first challenge was bringing all the required equipment down to the site. The sinkhole is quite isolated, and the operation required bulky pieces of equipment such as tanks, rebreathers, compressors, and a portable small hyperbaric chamber. Of course, David Shaw wouldn't be the only one going in the water. He would be joined by 7 other divers at various depths, acting as relay points for Dion Dreyer's body. The idea was to have the deepest diver, which was David, go first, followed 13 minutes later by the second deepest diver, who would then be followed by the third deepest, and so on and so on. Dave Shaw descends first into Bushman's Hole, as planned. Fast enough, he arrives at the end of the main line, connecting the surface to the bottom of the sinkhole. Attached to this line is another secondary line that connects the main line to Dion's body. David follows the thread and finds Dion's body. He then attempts to get Dion's body into the body bag. This proves to be a challenging thing to do at this depth. On top of this, the body is encased in mud, and the visibility is not the best. After a bit more work, Dave is able to get the body freed from the mud, only to realize there is another problem no one accounted for. When a body decays at that depth, in that environment, it doesn't necessarily decay. It becomes wax-like, forming a substance called adipocere. That substance has positive buoyancy, and that made Dion's body float, which made it significantly harder for Dave to put him in the body bag. Because the idea was to have the recovery on video, David strapped a camera onto his helmet, where he would usually wear his torch. He instead passed the torch over his left shoulder. When he began to try and free the body, he put his light next to him. After tugging the body around, he realizes that some ropes from the body bag have tangled around the light's head. This is quite a bad situation at that depth, and David realizes it. He tries to free himself, pulling more and more on the lines, trying to maneuver himself out of the situation, still without any success. The stress and sheer exertion ultimately lead to David's exhaustion. In the end, David wasn't able to get untangled and drowned next to Dion's body. Eagle's Nest Sinkhole Tragedy. On October 15, 2016, 2 experienced divers, Patrick Peacock and Chris Rittenmeyer, initiated a dive at Florida's Eagle's Nest Cave. The site is known for a maze of tunnels at depth. On the day prior, they had set up the cave with the appropriate decompression gases and bailout bottles, which were distributed along their planned route in the event of a CCR failure. A third diver remained as surface support. The plan was for the surface support diver to affirm they were on decompression and okay at a predetermined time. When they failed to show up at that time, Diver 3 checked back every 30 minutes until they were several hours past due, and at around 6 p.m., he placed a call to the Cave Country dive shop. A rescue team came a few hours later, and after several hours of searching, rescue divers found the bodies of the 2 divers on the exit side of the pit. Evidence suggests the 2 became disoriented. They likely experienced silt-out, where a diver's fins kick up clouds of sediment, reducing visibility to 0. In a state of panic, they would have burned through their air supply at an accelerated rate, their hearts pounding as they spun in circles in the total darkness. Unable to find the guideline leading to the exit, the 2 divers eventually drowned to death. Deepholder 3 Cave Tragedy. Keith Hendricks, an experienced cave diver, decided that he wanted to explore the Deepholder 3 Cave located in Hernando County, Florida. After a 6-year break from diving, Keith was ready to explore the underwater cave with his diving buddy, Mike Williams. As the 2 descended deeper into the cave, Keith's faulty dry suit caused him to struggle with buoyancy control at depth. As they began to ascend back to the surface, Keith became trapped, and Mike, unaware of the situation, reached the surface without him. Eventually, Keith was freed, but depleted his air supply in the process. Mike went back into the cave to find Keith, and after locating him, he managed to share air supply with Keith as they ascended to the surface safely. In a subsequent dive, Keith began to experience further complications, And despite Mike's efforts to save him, Keith tragically passed away. An autopsy revealed extensive lung barotrauma caused by pressure changes during the dive. Plura Cave Tragedy. On February 6, 2014, 5 Finnish cave divers attempted to make the traverse from the Plura River entry to the Steinugelflaget Dry Cave through the 3-kilometer-long Plura Cave. The group consisted of Patrick Grönqvist, Jari Huotarinen, Vesa Rantanen, Jari Uusmäki, and Kai Kankinen. The plan was to split the group into 2 teams. Patrick Grönqvist and Jari Huotarinen would go first into the cave, followed 2 hours later by Vesa Rantanen, Jari Uusmäki, and Kai Kankinen, the goal being to meet each other on the other side of the cave. The dive started with the team carving a triangular-shaped hole in the ice layer above the water using a chainsaw. This allowed the first team, Patrick and Jari Huotarinen, to penetrate the cave. Patrick is leading, followed by Jari Huotarinen. They made their way through the pristine water encased in limey walls, through the air chamber, and the descent, bringing them to a maximum depth of 132 meters. While starting the ascent, they encountered a particularly narrow passage at the 110-meter mark. Patrick continues his ascent for a while until he realizes that Jari Huotarinen isn't following him anymore. Turning around, he returns to the narrow passage, seeing a light move from side to side in the distance, indicating that Jari was in some kind of trouble. When approaching Jari, Patrick realizes that he is stuck in the narrow passage. This put them both in a delicate situation, as at 110 meters deep, each minute increases decompression time by a significant amount. After a few minutes of trying unsuccessfully to free Jari, Jari then tries to switch regulators, but in the process accidentally inhales water, and after panicking, slowly stops moving. Jari Huotarinen is now dead. The second team goes in 2 hours later. Everything goes well until they reach the same narrow passage, where Jari Uusmäki sees the lifeless body of Jari Huotarinen. After seeing his body, Jari Uusmäki panicked and drowned. At this point, the only divers left alive is Patrick, Vesa, and Kai. Those 3 then met up and ended the dive. After the incident, all 3 of them were checked into a hyperbaric unit to be treated for decompression sickness, while Vesa also sustained serious spinal injuries. Tank Cave Tragedy. On February 25, 2011, an Australian diver by the name of Agnes Malovka and her diving partner went to explore the Tank Cave, located in Australia. Malovka was a highly skilled cave diver and underwater photographer. While exploring a new section of the cave, which happened to be a very narrow rocky passage, she got separated from her diving partner. Due to the silt she stirred up from the cave walls, a silt cloud blurred her visibility, making it almost impossible to find her way out of the cave. Agnes eventually ran out of air and suffocated after she became disoriented. Her body was found about 550 meters away from the entrance, submerged under 20 meters of water in a tight section of the cave. Zacaton Sinkhole Tragedy. On April 6, 1994, Sheck Exley embarked on an adventure called the El Protector de Buceo Profundo project at the Zacaton sinkhole in Mexico. Together with his diving buddy Jim Bowden, they entered the sinkhole, which has a depth of about 339 meters, making it one of the deepest sinkholes in Mexico. The dive was going according to plan, but as Jim crossed the 244-meter mark, he saw a light shining in front of him. He could see Sheck's light far away. In the meantime, Sheck continued into the distance, and he was going at a faster rate than before. At 213 meters, his body couldn't take it anymore, and it started going into fits. His vision was obstructed by hundreds of small concentric circles with sparkling dots, and he started experiencing itching and stinging all over his body. This was high-pressure nervous syndrome, brought about by several rapid compressions. The extreme pressure of his descent has affected his brain function, and this caused his neural circuits to run wild. At 229 meters, Sheck stopped considering his options, which was to abort the descent or continue further down. He decided to continue his descent, but at a slower rate. When the bottom of the cave bottomed out at around 250 meters, Shek's body started shaking uncontrollably, but he ignored it. But even without seeing clearly due to the high-pressure nervous syndrome effect, he noticed he was on a lunar landscape, which was covered with small rocks and covered with nearly a foot of black sediment. He had gone deep into the water, where no one had ever been. As Jim began to ascend back to the surface, he noticed the line Shek used for his descent, and his stage bottles were unused. Shek tragically succumbed to high-pressure nervous syndrome effect and drowned in the process.